All right, welcome everyone. In this video, I want to practice how we can create a polygon, an SF object by scratch, just to make sure we're comfortable with this before moving on into the next problem. So in the code cell below, just to put the general plan that for creating these polygons, we need to create an outer ring, and we can call that whatever we like. So in the previous example, we had an outer ring which had 4 points, and we had two holes which also had 4 points. But polygons can have all sorts of different number of points, at least three, but you can have tons of points. So in this case, I'm going to create an outer ring, which is a pentagon. I'm going to create an inner ring, which is a hole. And then just remember, we need to create a list of points that we're going to create the polygon from. So our list is going to consist of two matrices. The first matrix is the outer ring. The next matrix is a hole. We have got one hole here. Once I create a list of matrices that define the points in each of my polygons, I then can create a polygon using the st underscore polygon function, apply that to my list of matrices, and then I can plot my polygon using the plot function. So those are the steps that we'll do. And we can have any number of pentagons and triangular holes. So I'm just going to give you one possible example. Okay, so here is some code that I've added. The main thing I've added here are the matrices that I'm using to define my polygons. So I'm calling my outer ring pent, since it's a pentagon, and I've defined it similar to how we did in the previous code cells. I've defined a matrix. I set the number of columns to the matrix, and then I've determined that I'm going to arrange these values by row. So the first two values are the first row, the second two values are the second row, and so on. So this matrix that I've entered for pent would have 1 point, which is the first row, 0, 0, that we start our polygon. The next row is 10, 0, so I would move over to the next point, and then I go over to 15, 5, up to 10, 10, over to 0, 10, and then back to 0, 0. So this gives me a pentagon, and this looks a bit like an arrow over here. And then we can do something similar with what I'm calling the triangular hole, tri-hole. And that would look like we've got three edges. I'm not going to draw this to scale, but we have the first one at 2, 2, then it goes up to 2, 8, then it goes over to 5, 5, and then it goes back to 2, 2. So my inner triangle would be something like this. Again, this is not drawn to scale. So that's what we should expect to get out of this code cell. But let me clear off my writing and let's take a look at what we get. So just remember, after I define each of these polygons with a matrix of values, I then define the points of the complete polygon that is going to contain both this outer ring pent and this inner hole tri-hole, that I'm going to create a list of these two matrices, pent and tri-hole. So this is now a list of two matrices that I store in my underscore points, since these are describing all of the points that I want to connect in a certain order and which ones are going to go with which object. Then I can create my polygon. I'm calling this my underscore poly by inputting the points, that list I just created, into st underscore polygon. So that will create the polygon. It's storing the points for each ring in my polygon as a matrix. And now I've got a list of those two matrices. And now I plot the polygon using the plot function. So I'm going to plot my underscore poly, and out comes that picture that we more or less had above. I didn't draw my triangle carefully to scale. but we've got an outer pentagon and an inner hole, which is this triangle, and that makes up our polygon for this first question. Okay, so in the next video, we'll move on and talk about some other geometry objects that we can work with in the SF package.